With the recent Jack Eichel situation unfolding, I decided to follow suit with a continuation to the first video that I did on NHL players who lost their captaincy and why. And just like the previous part 1, in case you haven't seen it, we're going to be going through each particular situation and doing our best to answer as to why each player lost his C in the end. And with that, here are 4 more NHL players who lost their captaincy and why. It's not every day in the NHL's modern era that you see the less than conventional approach to captaincy such as this, but it just so happens that for the start of the 2008-2009 campaign, Luongo was officially, yet unofficially, due to league constraints, named team captain to kick off the season. Unsurprisingly, the decision was made by team president and GM at the time, Mike Gillis, who was known to think a little outside of the box as far as his conduct. "Leaders lead by example," said Gillis. "Roberto is the leader of this team right now. We really feel strongly about that. To not do something like this means you have a leader that isn't recognized. We wanted to make sure that he is recognized for his contribution both on and off the ice," he says. Also, bringing the idea to light was head coach at the time, Alain Vigneault, who also stood in accordance with the decision while saying, "In our mind for this organization, this is the right thing to do," says Vigneault. "Roberto is the right individual to be captain," he says. Even though the move may have seemed outside of the norm, the logic was definitely evident from the start, as the netminder was not only one to lead by example, but also became a fan favorite early on in BC. And it was still obvious, similarly to Marc-Andre Fleury, even after Luongo had been traded years later. Anyways, even though he wasn't officially allowed to wear the C on his jersey, the team improvised, and instead, number 1's mask was uniquely adorned with the C regardless. The Canucks were able during this short-lived captaincy to make the playoffs in consecutive postseasons for the first time since the 2004-2005 lockout transpired. But after losing to the Blackhawks in the second round in the summer of 2010,
worst song in hockey. I don't even want to listen to it anymore.
This defeat apparently changed the perspective of Vancouver's captain, as after around only 2 seasons of captaincy, Luongo decided to give the venture up for the greater good. "I want to put my whole focus on goaltending," Luongo says. "For me, taking a step back, putting my entire focus on that is more important. At the end of the day, winning a championship for this team is more important than being captain," he says. Therefore, we can conclude here that, as far as we know, it wasn't Luongo's performance on ice or actions off of it that caused him to lose his C, but rather it came as a selfless move in order to better achieve success. And in some aspects, the team did, as they made their first Stanley Cup final appearance in nearly 20 years, later in the postseason of 2011. For those of you who watched my previous video, which was a continuation of, then you'll have a taste already of the backstory that involved Trevor Linden losing his captaincy. Even still, this time we're going to go a little more in depth here, and similarly to the Brett Hull situation over in St. Louis that came about, there's one factor that's prevalent in both of these instances: Mike Keenan. Most of you probably aren't surprised, but staying in Vancouver, we're going back to the 90s, when names like Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, and Mark Messier were still amongst the best in the league. In fact, it was the latter and Messier, after making his way west of Vancouver from the Rangers, and Keenan also went right along with him to BC. Despite Messier being captain of the Rangers directly prior to signing with the Canucks as a free agent, they also had a captain on the roster, pending the start of the 1997-98 season commencing. But before puck drop even happened, Linden, who had been drafted by the Canucks second overall in 1988, selflessly decided to give his C over to Messier. After longtime GM Pat Quinn was fired, it wasn't long after that the fan favorite and Trevor Linden was shipped over to Long Island upon a trade. Keenan, who helped give the initiative for the trade, stated, "I'd seen him play in 1994 and I wasn't seeing the same player. I knew it was within his repertoire to play at the same level again, and I thought that should be his own expectation," Keenan says. Similarly to Mark Messier, Scott Niedermayer joined his new team ready to shake off adversarial qualities. Just as Messier, Niedermayer was also previously on a team that defeated his current one upon his arrival in Orange County. A more modern, yet role reversal example would be Torrey Krug going over to St. Louis last offseason. Anyways, the fact that Niedermayer was held in such high esteem in New Jersey as one of the franchise greats was a key motivator in allowing the Norris winner to join his brother Rob in Anaheim in 2005. With a Stanley Cup to his name, the defenseman seemed like exactly the type of experienced leader that the evolving franchise needed at the present time, and therefore there was no hesitation when it came to giving Niedermayer the C. In fact, also like Messier, he received the honor before he had even officially skated in a regular season game for his new team. But one could say that it all worked out in the end, as the Ducks were able to enter the Western Conference Finals in the following postseason in 2006, before falling to the Oilers in 5 games. But this was only the start, as the captain helped lead his team to their first Stanley Cup in the next postseason while receiving the Conn Smythe in the process. At 34 years of age, as Niedermayer was contemplating his future in the NHL, the Ducks organization apparently didn't appreciate the uncertainty. After being suspended by his team upon a technicality, which allowed them to abstain from paying him, the defenseman's captaincy was then given to a fellow blue liner in Chris Pronger. Despite this though, later down the road, since Niedermayer remained with his team, his captaincy was restored upon the Pronger trade, which sent him to Philadelphia in result. Therefore, one could say that this story sort of had a happy ending. Well, if you're familiar with the current happenings of the hockey world at all, then you'll most likely know exactly why Jack Eichel is here and why he lost his C to begin with. And really, if you thought the already strained relationship between Eichel and the team that once drafted him second overall couldn't get any worse, well, think again, as the former captain has been very vocal about the discourse between him and the Sabres organization involving his pending surgery. Eichel, who has been known to make polarizing comments before, stated that he hopes to be playing this upcoming season, quote, wherever that may be, but after sitting out for a portion of last season injured, his journey to regaining his health has remained stagnant for quite some time. The forward has been very adamant in the surgery he'd like to be performed on his herniated disc, in which he would be receiving an artificial disc replacement, which according to spinehealth.com does usually provide greater mobility. Despite this though, the particular surgery hasn't been performed on an NHL player before, and on the other side of the conflict, the Sabres are wanting their player to get an anterior cervical discectomy, the treatment that Peyton Manning received shortly before he won the Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos. Even still, the lack of progress caused Eichel to report back to his team at a disadvantage, in other words, still injured. And in result, the organization decided to strip Eichel of his captaincy since he was unable to pass a physical. GM Kevin Adams had this to say about the situation. Teams want clarity, and over the course of the summer, there wasn't great clarity. We have more clarity now, he says. This is an elite franchise player in his prime, under contract. We need to, as an organization, move forward. But we can't compromise on certain things that we want to believe. We're going to work at it. Every day we do. We have in the past and we will continue to, he says. Eichel, who has been placed on injury reserve, will have something to say eventually, I'm sure, knowing how vocal he can be. But for now, that's the extent of the Eichel drama in Buffalo. Stay tuned for more on the never-ending saga.